You my bitch.
It's Broadway Comedy Club Radio, the only podcast that's also a comedy club, with your clearly above average hosts, Al Martin and Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to Broadway Comedy Club Radio. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, here in New York City, joined, as always, by my dear friend and the owner of Broadway Comedy Club, Al Martin. Al, how's it going down in Florida, bud?
I am doing great, and this episode, not only is the guest fabulous, but we are going to be showing our true improv skills, because I had to pick up Mrs. Martin from a medical procedure that she had done, so I didn't have time to get back to the studio. So I am doing this from my car.
Yeah, so those who are watching on YouTube can see Al is actually currently in his vehicle. He's driving. He's got his sunglasses on with the summer heat down there in Florida.
Yeah, exactly. And my wife, Mrs. Martin, is here.
And she's not on camera at the moment, but she may chime in at any time. There she is. Hello. For those on YouTube, you can see us on our YouTube page, Broadway Comedy Club Radio. Hello, Mrs. Martin. All right, Al, why don't you bring on our guest? I know it's someone that we've been trying to have on the program for a long time. So without further ado, go ahead and make the introduction, bud.
Okay, so this guest, you would have to be under a rock not to know who he is. He was a really important part of the Howard Stern show, as far as I'm concerned.
Sometimes people call and be obnoxious, and I'd be obnoxious back. Because sometimes people call.
You know what the really bad one is?
Right.
Where he pretends to be a priest.
Oh.
And, you know, people will call in to make a phone request for a song.
Yeah.
And he'll go, yes, you have...
the Religious Network.
Let me hear that voice.
The Religious Network.
Yes, how can I help you?
Oh, I saw. Oh,
yes, how
good.
you doing?
Well, I didn't know you did that. I never heard that one.
Oh, man, that's a really
this
bad
is a Reverend Alderman. Can I please help you? You experience any bestiality or anything like that? Something like that.
Really? Well, I didn't realize you were doing stuff like that. That's funny.
You know what?
Because my favorite part of that, well, yeah, let me give you the intro and then we could talk about it. But a really important part of the Howard Stern show. But, you know, he was able to pull out the Daily Double, because a lot of times people leave a show, they don't near the success, but he landed right on the Tonight Show as a writer, announcer, and you can't be alive and not know our guest, the one and only John Melendez. John?
Thank you, Al. You can call me Stuttering John. Everybody else does.
Well, listen, stuttering is big now. We have a president that is a stutterer, right?
I know. It's amazing.
You know, you got to work now a little impression of Biden, and then, you know, you might have a third thing going on now. But I'm sure there's other things going on in your world.
You know, it's funny, Al. During the debates, I know that they told Trump to keep interrupting Biden because one of the worst things for a stutterer is if someone's going to interrupt, if they anticipate that, it only makes them stutter even more.
Yeah, that's like telling a guy who's using a walker he has to make a sharp right turn suddenly, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so John, let me ask you about the stuttering thing, because you know, I've seen you on TV and heard you on the radio thousands of times, and I've actually never heard you stutter. So why would they call a guy who doesn't stutter Stuttering John?
You know, it's funny in a way you say that, Clayton, because when I was first doing stand-up, like, the first show I did, the first real show was at Al's Club. I stuttered my freaking face off. And I even talk about it in my book. I call Al one of my comedy angels, because after I bombed and sweat profusely and stuttered my ass off, Al told me, hey, I have another stage, go up and do the same thing. And because I didn't have time to think about it, and I had a beer or two before I went on, I didn't stutter at all. But getting back, why it's funny is then I became so comfortable on stage, I would get on and not stutter, and people would boo me because they're like, you're a fraud, you don't stutter.
Yeah. Do you know who else struggled for many years with stuttering is, kind of a legendary journalist, TV personality, John Stossel. He also is very open about the fact that he had to overcome stuttering. Many people know him from his days at, like, I think it was 2020, one of those kind of investigative reporter kind of shows. And now he has his own kind of network on YouTube or whatever. But yeah, he was always a stutterer, and he's very open about how he had to overcome it. It's so interesting that people who have a problem with stuttering are attracted to jobs like being a comedian or a TV host, but maybe that's just the impulse to try to get over and overcome whatever is standing in your way, right?
Yeah, it is funny because James Earl Jones is also a stutterer.
I didn't know that one.
Wow.
And Carly Simon and Moses was said to be a stutterer. So.
I missed Moses a few years. He was.
Al, that's why God wrote the commandments on the freaking
On the
rock,
tablets.
because it would have taken 17 years for Moses to spit it out.
To spit it out. Right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Now, John, so you got your early start, obviously, on the Stern Show, and I've watched that show from day one. I got to be honest, I don't watch it as much as I used to because it seems like a much more formatted show now in terms of, back then it seemed very freewheeling. And I got to be honest, my favorite part of that show is not the celebrity guests that he sometimes gets. That, to me, they're a bore. Yeah. To me, the most fun on that show is when he starts going off on the staff, when he'd go off on you or
not for us.
Yeah.
And like even the other day, after 30 years of listening to it, he went off on something on Gary, and it just never gets old for me. I just, and then they start with the Baba Fufi and all that crap, and then I can't stop laughing. I mean, sometimes I've done this for like 30 years listening to this show, and I still laugh at it.
Al, my favorite part of being on that show was to bust Baba Booey's balls. There was nothing more fun. I don't know if you remember, I stole the Gary puppet. I mean, I would constantly pull pranks on him. He's so easy. So yeah, I get it.
You and Sal used to do some whacked out shit to him too as well. Excuse my language, by the way, on that one. We are trying to go for a PG, but I mean, it was funny just listening to him go off on all of them, and to me, that's the fun part of that show. But I think also your beginnings were in music, right? Didn't you also have a band at one time or something?
Yeah. Actually, I was signed to Atlantic. I had, I had a single. I mean, I'll Talk My Way Out of It was played all over New York radio. But I started out as a musician. I always wanted to be a comic, but I was afraid I would stutter on every joke, which I did at the club.
Yeah. It's actually two positives equal a negative. You were stuttering like crazy, but you had so many Heinekens in you at the time that I think it all balanced out by the time you did the second show.
I know. Well, I'm telling you, I always called beer my anti-stuttering medication.
Exactly. But, when I talk to people a lot of times in comedy and they ask me, how do you make it in comedy and how do you become a success in comedy and what's behind it? And I always say to them, hard work. You got to be willing to work hard and sometimes for very little money, very little benefit, until you get good enough where you are in a position to get that money and get those benefits. And many times I used to point out to people your story on like how you just sort of like walked into the Stern Show, right? And just you had this ability of having a microphone and sticking it in different celebrities' faces at weird times, catching them off guard maybe even. And that's sort of how you made your name for yourself in the beginning, right?
It's exactly how I did. I mean, but speaking about hard work, sometimes I would wait 15 hours to get an interview. I remember I waited 15 hours to get Chevy Chase, but it was just that kind of persistence and work because I knew if I got him, I'd be on the air the next morning. And if I'm on the air the next morning, the more people know who I am. Then the more people know who I am, the more money I make on the road,
Exactly. Exactly. So so that's the key. And I tell people that all the time, that sometimes in the beginning, when you have nothing really to offer, but your enthusiasm and all that sometimes that's the card you have to play, which you did so successfully.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Al.
So, John, you're not afraid of hard work. You put in the work. You wait 15 hours to interview a celebrity. And at night, you were at Al's Comedy Club. Back in the old days, Al owned New York Comedy Club, and it was actually divided into two different clubs. We had the back room, which was a little bit bigger, and then the side room, which was basically like a hallway. With
A hallway with 45, 50 seats. So what the hell?
Yeah, packed them in. So, John, why don't you tell us some of your memories about the early days performing at that club?
Well, I like the one I just told is my favorite. It's when I just bombed because I stuttered so much. I had my wife with me. It was embarrassing to tell. and then Al told me, now go up and do it, in the next room. But I used to go there all the time. I would hang out with Al there, and I would perform. I don't know, Al. I would go there like 2-3 times a week, I think, and just
Yeah. You were there. You were there a lot. You were honing your craft, and but that's exactly the way you're supposed to do it. But when you're working on a show where the call time is about 4 or 5 in the morning, and then you're doing stand up at night, and then people complain to me about, working a 9 to 5 job. I said, a lot of times I'd point out, well, here was John doing spots at night at the comedy clubs, and he'd have to be up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning to do the Stern show.
That's true. And you know what? Well, I'll tell you, Clayton, here's another funny story. I don't know if you remember this, Al. There was this one annoying older comic, and every time I did a set, I'd come off the stage and he'd start giving me tips. And
this has to be Steve Aarons, I think.
Yes. And I finally looked at him and I just said, dude, I don't even know who you are. Who the hell are you? Give me tips.
Well, if they call you the stutterer, they call him the spitter. During coronavirus, this is one guy you can't be near because he would spit right in your face while he was talking. It was like
pandemic.
And he'd get, he was nearsighted, and he was a very vain guy, and he would never admit to wearing glasses. And I would say to him, Steve, why are you up in my face spitting? Just put on a pair of glasses. I'm not hard to miss,
Is he the gay guy that would do the bit about DMV, like the
Yes. Isn't it amazing? You described some guy that you haven't seen in 20 some odd years, and just by a brief sentence, I was able to tell you who it was.
It is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But it's funny, right? It's Steve Aarons. Yeah, you're right. It is. I remember that name.
He has to always wear that tight black T-shirt.
Always the tight black T-shirt.
You see that? Talk about a good memory, huh?
Yeah, the tight black T-shirt was like, as a young comic, relatively naive and not really sure what was going on in the comedy world. I used to hang out at New York Comedy Club sometimes in my early days, and I was much younger. And man, he used to ask me all the intrusive questions like, so do you work out?
I'll tell you a very, very funny brief story about him. Not that it's the Steve Aarons episode, but
yes, it is.
Yes,
it is.
Whatever happened to him?
Well, I'll tell you. So he does new talent shows. He produces them at my club. And the funny thing about it is a very funny comedian. Her name is Laurie Kilmartin. You know Laurie, right?
I think. Yeah.
Sure. So Laurie would come in every night to do spots at the club. And, Steve is a very touchy-feely guy, especially, he's a gay guy, but he likes certain women, So he liked Laurie, and he would come over, and it's funny. Straight women will almost let gay guys do anything to them, and he's like feeling her up and touching her. And then one day I said, Laurie, you find that inappropriate at all? If it is, I'll talk to him and tell him to stop. She goes, oh no, Al, he's gay, he's harmless. To fuck with her, I said, No, he's not. He's bisexual. He loves women.
But Al,
Oh, she went.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
She went nuts. She was going to kill him. And I said, "Take it easy. I'm kidding around. I'm kidding around."
But Al, I mean, I can't remember. God, yeah, I'm. I know that you've told me this on my show, but you must have seen a lot of guys coming in and out of that club who were nobodies going in, and then they're now big.
Oh my God! I just was looking at some old tapes and flyers and stuff. Tiffany Haddish, who's like one of the hottest ones out there right now, from Tracy Morgan show. Yep. She did a spots years ago at Broadway, and Greg Giraldo started at the open mic at New York Comedy Club. Artie Lang started in an improv troupe at New York Comedy Club, part of an improv troupe, and then he went on to do stand-up years later. So a lot of them started over there. Jim Gaffigan did a lot of his early work at New York Comedy Club at open mics and stuff like that. So, I often tell people,
sorry, I'm always the interviewer, Clayton, but have there been any of these famous comics that were cool before they became famous, and then as soon as they became famous, it's like, who are you?
Yeah, well, I always joke around because they start out at my club, work in my room, but when they do an interview, and they ask them, on various TV shows, they do an interview and they go, where'd you start? And, I started at Caroline's, Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, everybody starts at Caroline's, right? Yeah, that's
exactly. They all start at Caroline's, but they wind up at my clubs.
Yeah, well, that sucks because I mentioned you in my book, Al. You should read it one of these days.
You always gave me props and respect, and you were great, John. I always will remember you for that. So now,
John, tell us about the book. Yeah, let's hear about this book. You mentioned the book a couple times. I'm interested. What's it called? What's it about?
It's called Easy for You to Say, and it's about everything from my childhood to working with Stern, all the behind the scenes of Stern, and a lot of it Stern fans aren't going to want to hear about, but it's true. And Stern's been under a lot of critique because he is just as toxic of a boss as Ellen DeGeneres is being called out to be. So when Howard said, Al, I don't know if you remember, but when Howard was talking about Ellen, he goes, Ellen, you should just own it. And then I did my own show, my podcast, and said, Howard, are you kidding me? Ellen should own it. You should freaking own it. Because he was really bad. Not only on the air, I'm talking about behind the scenes. Him and Buck Wall would pay us nothing and, everything else. But the book is all about all the fun stories of being on the show and all the bad stories. And that goes the same for all my behind the scenes with Jay Leno. The only difference between Jay Leno is he was never an asshole to anybody, but he does have OCD and he has a lot of great stories. So I talk a lot about Jay in there, and then also about my prank phone call to Donald Trump from Air Force One.
Oh, those prank phone calls! You and that guy Jenks were the masters of that thing, of those prank calls, but especially you. But now, are you able to talk at all? What happened that caused you to leave the show? For some reason, I must have not been paying attention during that era of when you were on the show, and then suddenly I realized that you were no longer on the show. What exactly happened that caused you to leave or stop being on the show?
Al, I wanted out of there after the first 5. There's a stutter for you, Clayton. I hope you're happy now, Clayton.
I jinxed it. That was my fault.
You're the mush stutterer.
What's next, Clayton? Are you going to a cripple and saying limp for me?
I'm so sorry. I really do apologize. I'm so sorry.
And John, this is the guy who came on late today. We couldn't start it.
I was on it. I was right on time. Right on time.
You don't feel tardy. But no, I wanted to get out there, so I finally did this show. I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and that gave me like national fame. But not only that, I got the love from everyday people who weren't Stern fans. Everyone thought I was cast to be the asshole, but instead I came off like the real guy that I am, like a father, a good dad,
Right.
and I was funny, but I wasn't like I wasn't an asshole. So then, sorry, I shouldn't be cursing. So that got me a guest appearance on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. And after I did that, I killed it. It's on my website at stutteringjohnmelendez.com. I killed it. And right after that segment, the executive producer and head writer offered me a job. So,
wow.
and I tried talking to Howard about it. Howard would refuse to talk to me about it. I told Robin. She told me to go talk to Howard's assistant. I tried. Howard was on the essay. He doesn't want to talk to me. So finally, the Tonight Show offers me the announcer job. So this is a funny story, Al, because I only tell Artie Lang, because Artie was my closest friend on the show, and I said, Artie, I'm going to be the announcer on Tonight Show. I'm going to sign the contract. And Artie was like, John, you should tell Howard. I go, no, Artie. If I told Howard, he would put the kibosh on it. I know he would. And Artie's like, no, he would. Artie's like, no, he wouldn't do that. So hence, I did not tell Howard, and I signed the NBC contract. And Howard always said, I don't know why you wouldn't tell me. So, cut to Al, Artie's up to be the a replacement host of Craig Ferguson on CBS.
Right.
Rob Burnett is the executive producer. Artie was going to do a 2-week tryout on the air as the Late Show talk show host. Artie was ecstatic. This could change his whole life. Rob Burnett says, you know what, Artie, I'm just going to call Howard just to get his blessing. Rob Burnett calls Howard, and Howard says, no effing way. You can't take my guy. And Artie's deal gets squashed. So it's just kind of ironic that Artie was the one who tells me that I should tell Howard before I signed the contract, and look what happened to Artie.
Sounds like you played it right, John.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I know Howard. Like Howard's not like Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart has guys like Steve Carell as correspondents on the show. He applauds them when they go on to bigger and better things. Howard's not that guy. Howard hates when you leave and do bigger and better things. Howard wants everyone to be under his thumb. That's the kind of guy.
So in other words, he hates when someone's working for nothing and they could advance themselves to something.
Yes, he's not happy
It's
about
incredible.
that.
That's incredible.
And Clayton, and that's the exact opposite of guys like you, Al, is like I'm sure you're happy to see guys like me start out and, like with nothing and then, turn into something, and then you can take credit for it and go,
yeah,
I gave that guy the opportunity. I gave his, start as a stand-up. That's a feather in your cap, Al. Howard does not look at things like that. Howard doesn't look at it like that. I mean, it's crazy.
And for years, I've been trying to get that guy Steve Aarons to leave, and I give him my blessing.
Nice callback. Yeah, I gotta agree with John on this one. Al roots for all of us. There's a kind of I guess like a fraternity at this point, boys and girls fraternity of comics that are kind of in Al's stable. We work both the clubs that Al owns, and if any one of us gets any kind of heat at all, Al is he's always on our side. He's not trying to hold us back. In fact, Al has opened up a lot of doors for me to get auditions and things that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten, even though it might mean that I would move on to something bigger and better, and then Al has to find another podcast host. But I think that he would be
where do you find those?
I think he would be really happy for all of our success. So I'll give you a lot of credit for that, Al, because obviously, from what John's saying about Howard Stern, not everybody's like that. So yeah.
Well, it's so ironic. John Hines, also part of the Howard Stern show, had that show Jump the Shark. And I really feel, being a longtime listener from the early days of Howard Stern, that show has really jumped the shark. It's not
Al. That was one of my questions. I interviewed Shuley from the show like a year ago. I caught him at a hotel, And the first question that I asked him is, isn't it ironic that the guy who created Jump the Shark is now working for the show that Jumped the Shark?
Yeah, I think a few years after he went to Sirius Radio, and ironically was able to say anything he wants for that. That's the reason why he went. The show has become very unfunny to me. I mean, he gets these really, it's become more slick and more polished, and it lost the edge that it once had. I don't know if Howard changed once he got married or once he went to Sirius Radio.
I'll tell you exactly, Al. It's when they brought in Marcy Turk, who is the executive producer, who's even in charge of Baba Booey now. And they brought her in, and then I call her Yoko Turco, because she literally just changed the whole show. And it's sad, because really what you're saying, Al, is when I was there, the show was organic. Everything was real. We didn't have scripts. We didn't have scripts. It wasn't planned. Howard's going to goof on Gary. Howard's going to goof on Fred. It was all real. Now it just seems so
scripted.
Yeah.
Very scripted. You listen, Howard gets on about 6:30, does about 40 minutes of nonsense or whatever. That's probably the best part of the show, because he's goofing on everybody, giving his opinion. And then they go to some commercials, and then there's the guest between 8 and 9 usually, who usually blows most of the time. And then Robin does the news, and it's goodbye, and they're done for the day. Almost now, exactly at 10 o'clock. Sometimes he'd run to 10:30, 10:40, 11 o'clock. But it's just become from controlled chaos, which was great, it became too scripted a show.
Yeah, and you know what? So I do have to correct you on one thing. Howard didn't go to Sirius so he could say, what he wanted. Howard went to Sirius because they're paying him freaking $100 million a year. And let me tell you now, Al, Howard does, I think, 80 shows a year right now. He only does 3 a week and then takes 6 weeks off vacation. Howard does 80 shows. He makes $1.2 million every show.
Unbelievable. I mean, look, you talked about his manager before, and you got to give that guy props, because he took basically a radio personality and you can't take it away from Howard Stern either. I mean, that team did totally revolutionize radio and what the potential was for radio performers and how successful they can become. And he has done it all. He's done a movie. He's done best-selling books and his show on terrestrial and, satellite radio. So there's no doubt he's a giant in the profession. But, getting back to you.
So let me ask you, Al. So let me ask you, what the hell is he so angry about?
Well, that's the thing. Some people never get over that, and it's very surprising. I find a lot of comics that I argue with in the early years, they're so laser focused on trying to make it that they really sometimes can't control their anger. But once they've made it and they're successful, they almost do a 360 and they become very relaxed, and a nice side of their personality comes out. It seems to me, by what you're describing, Howard is just the opposite, he's I think those are issues that only therapy might be able to get to the bottom of. But
no, I'm saying that he sees a therapist 4 times a week for the last 10 years. It ain't working.
Yeah, that's not working. He needs a new therapist, I think. But let me just say that Al pays me $1.2 million per episode of this podcast, and that's why I don't have any anger. I'm happy. I feel like that's a fair. Don't you agree, John? That's a fair compensation, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
You know what, Clayton? Here's the thing. I know I sound bitter. People accuse me of being bitter. I'm not bitter. I appreciate Howard giving me my start. I appreciate all the great times I had with him. The only thing that I'm irritated about is just how badly they treat people there. Do you know what I'm saying? And I mean, that's what it is. And
well, you're calling it out. I mean, it's not like you left that show and went nowhere into obscurity the rest of your life. You landed on the Tonight Show, for God's sakes. I mean, that's just as huge, if not bigger, So you went probably from one of the most successful radio franchises in history to one of the most successful late night TV talk shows in history.
I know.
There's nobody that can say that. I mean, really, you're the only person that's ever kind of accomplished that daily double. It's incredible. Now, so you left Stern, and how did you wind up on that Tonight Show? How did that exactly? Well, you kind of briefly described it before, but how is that run compared to working on Stern?
Well, I always say it's like such a juxtaposition. It's like going from a Vivid Video to Disney. But, Jay is the greatest guy. But I don't know if you heard today, which I wanted to talk to you about, Al, as a comedy club owner. It's in the Post today. Jay Leno apologized to the Asian community.
For jokes he did, yeah.
Yeah. And look, I understand because Jay's been like America's comic. He's the nice guy, and he is the nice guy. But it is getting scary, Al, for all of us comics. And Clayton, I'm sure you could identify with this. Is just that, everything's become way too PC now that you can't do anything anymore.
Well, here's my opinion on cancel culture. Cancel culture is the one that should be canceled. I mean, it's ridiculous already. Listen, and it's like you ever hear when people compare, let's say, Mike Trout, the baseball player today, and they'll compare him with, Joe DiMaggio or something.
Yeah.
You can't compare sometimes people of different eras, and it's the same thing like with this, because what might have been more tolerated 30, 40 years ago, you can never say today. We've evolved as people. Like, I can remember growing up and calling people, names, derogatory names, but I was a 16-year-old kid. What the hell did I know?
Yeah.
And I thought it was being cool with the other kids. I didn't. My thought processes wasn't deep enough to say, "Oh, this kid's going to go home and he's going to be hurt. And his feelings are hurt." I mean, listen. People used to call me Dirty Jew when I was growing up, but that as we grow older and as we evolve and as we see how stupid,
Yeah, take a shower.
So, but listen, there's not a person in the world that hasn't said stupid things when they were younger. I mean, that's just what are we going to do? Cancel comics that 30 years ago said a joke like, that guy's so fat he's got more chins than a Chinese phone book. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
That would get you canceled today.
Yeah,
exactly.
What are your views on apologizing, John? Do you think that comedians should ever apologize for a joke that they made?
Well, okay. If I'm on stage at a club and for instance, and I've done this, Al, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I know a lot of comics have done this. I asked the girl how many months pregnant she was. She goes, "I'm not pregnant." Okay. Yeah. No, but I didn't know. It was innocent. But then you got to apologize because you really weren't trying to be a dick. It just so happened. Yeah. But yeah, if I'm on stage and I don't really, say anything too bad to people. But if I do offend somebody, I'll apologize. I don't mind owning up to if I hurt somebody's feelings. I'm okay with that. And I get why Jay had to apologize. But getting back to what Al was saying, in today's world, Don Rickles would never be allowed to be a comic.
Oh, no. And look at Lisa Lampanella. She had to change the trajectory of her career because she saw where this was all going.
Yep.
So, instead of to do stand-up in the style that she did it, she went on to become a motivational speaker and is doing other stuff, to compensate financially for not doing her stand-up. But it's sad that she had to stop doing what she loves, and that people were pretty accepting of, because it was coming from her, and because of this whole crazy hit squad of people that are out there, and how effective their boycotting would be is unknown. Because I remember once going to the circus, and PETA was there protesting the circus. Now, 2 weeks after this protest, it turned out that Ringling Brothers caved in to pressure from PETA and decided not to have lions and elephants in the circus anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I got to tell you, there were 7 people at that protest, and there were 18,000 people going in to watch the circus with the lions and the elephants. So who is making these decisions and knee-jerk reactions to a few people that are protesting, and then they, close down their operations? It's crazy.
No, I know it is, and I know Lisa, and she's the sweetest person in the world. So it's sad that people can't differentiate between an act and the real person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
I think the problem is partly because we have a reality culture and people are used to kind of like spending time with their favorite TV personalities or comedians on Instagram or wherever else, TikTok, whatever you want. And so they kind of blur the lines between when they're actually performing and when they're really being themselves. And I think that has kind of caused, is contributed to the problem of comedians being able to have an act, because the audience isn't really differentiating between a performance and like what I really think or feel. And I think there's so much going on with cancel culture and people trying to censor comics, but I think funny will always win. That's where I'm at.
So John, you worked on the show with another good friend of mine who's going to be a guest on now in a couple of weeks, Ross Mark, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I've known Ross for 30 years. Also, he gave me my first start on the TV show Evening at the Improv. He booked me on there. He booked me in the Vegas Improv. He's always been a great friend of mine, and a wonderful guy.
Oh no, he helped me get the Improv, in Las Vegas. I mean, because his stepdad's Bud Friedman.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're gonna have him on in a few weeks. We're very much looking forward to speaking with him. We'll tell him you said hi, John. How's that?
Yeah, tell him I said hi. But I'll tell you this: the sad part is Bob and Ross, Bob Reed,
right,
and Ross Mark. They pretty much discovered Chelsea Handler, and then like Chelsea Handler was a bitch to Ross afterwards. So I mean, Chelsea Handler, I'll tell you, and I talk about it in my book, just really not a nice person, just not.
My wife here is not a fan of Chelsea Handler either. She hates her.
Keep her clothes on.
Keep her clothes on is what she says.
Yeah, and ask Ross about Chelsea, because I'd be interested to hear what he like.
I'm looking forward to it, unless he tells me not to.
Because
we'll try to get some dirt on Chelsea from him. All right, so we're almost out of time, guys. But John, you mentioned your podcast. I want to make sure that our listeners can know what that is and what it's all about and how they can find it too.
The Stuttering John podcast on the Stuttering John YouTube channel. I have great guests tomorrow on my Beer on the Balcony, which is the set that I have behind me here. I'm having Rainn Wilson on, but instead of Rainn, it's his alter ego, Terry Carnation.
Oh, okay.
But I have a lot of big guests. I've had Jay Leno on. I've had Howie Mandel on. But I've had Al on.
That's great. Yeah. So check out the website.
So, any other projects or?
Check out the website, everybody. It's stutteringjohnmelendez.com. You can find his new book.
Yeah, and then you can follow me on Twitter at StutteringJohnM, because some idiot stole the name Stuttering John.
Right, and then they want you to pay a huge sum of money to get your own name. Yeah, Stuttering John M on Twitter. Easy for you to say. That's the name of the book. I'm definitely going to get myself a copy. I can't wait to read.
I'm going to get one today, as a matter of fact. It's on Amazon, or?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. And say hi to Ross for me.
Yeah.
I will, definitely.
Yeah, all right, John, anything else you want to say before we have to say goodbye?
I'll just say thanks for having me on. And like I've said before, I thank, Al Martin for, probably being one of the greatest comedy club owners. I'll leave with this, Clayton. I have never heard a comic, and I've toured the country, never have I heard a comic ever say anything bad about Al Martin. So,
Thank you, John. Thank you.
And that's, Clayton, I'm sure you worked a lot of clubs. A lot of comedy club managers aren't afforded that luxury.
No, sir. Usually they get
Carolyn.
nothing but trash.
Hey, Carolyn, Carolyn, you heard what John said. Can I get lucky tonight?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we have confirmation that Al's going to get lucky tonight.
There you go. I'm getting lucky, and I have to thank Stuttering John Melendez for that. Thank you.
All right, John,
guys.
thanks so much for joining us. Great having you on the show. So for Stuttering John Melendez, for Al Martin, and for Mrs. Martin, also along for the ride today in the car, and for our fantastic producer, Jay Frank, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you all so much for listening.
I just like to bitch.
Hi, Al Martin here, owner of the Broadway Comedy Club and Greenwich Village Comedy Club in New York City. And I just authored a great book on stand-up comedy and my 30-year journey called Did It on a Dare, How I Built a Comedy Empire in 30 Short Years. So if you want an interesting story on the comedy scene in the 90s and early 2000s up until the present, if you're an aspiring comic and want to learn about some of my golden rules of comedy from a comedy club owner, this is the book for you. It's available on Amazon, and just go to Amazon, click Al Martin, and it'll take you right to my page. It's available on audio and Kindle as well as paperback. Thank you.